2-0, much better than 2-4. How about that, Michigan fans? 2 weeks in the books, 2 expected wins, but still taking care of business through a couple games at home against Western Michigan and against Washington. Well, we're going to dive into it over the next hour or so here on our first Michigan live stream. We got Desmond Upshaw on the line, of course, and also Dre Artis. How you boys doing today?
Fantastic. Well, all right, given the circumstances, but just glad to be here.
Absolutely.
It could always be worse. So I'm doing good. It's hump day, and we're just a few days away from week 3 for Michigan. So rocking and rolling.
So I'm thinking that there's some people on the line who might be like, I don't know these 2 other guys on the side. So welcome to the Voice of College Football, of course. They host, between Desmond and Dre, our post-game coverage of Michigan football. They have torn it up the first 2 weeks. Some excellent analysis and conversation with all of you after the Michigan game. So right after the Michigan-Northern Illinois game, make it a destination right here at the Voice of College Football with Desmond and with Dre after the ball game. And then some of you are probably like, well, I catch Desmond and Dre after the game. Who are you? Well, I am Mark. And so it's great to see all of you. We got 24 channels here at the Voice of College Football, and the Michigan destination is definitely one of them. So, man, after catching your first 2 post games, I know better than to talk too much here. So I want to stay out of the way and let you guys dive into it. So let me throw out the first topic, and then we'll just take it in whatever direction we want to take it. And of course, invite everybody to leave your comments and your questions in the live chat, and we will address whatever you've got. But, there was kind of a split out there, you guys, between Michigan fans in regards to this performance was impressive, 3-touchdown win. Can't really help what Washington brought to the game. They were supposed to be something different as a top 25 team, Pac-12 contender. Obviously, they tripped up against Montana, so it wasn't the most impressive opponent coming into the game. But Michigan throws for 50 yards. So you got about half the Michigan fans out there that are saying, hey, we did what we had to do, and we were running it down their throats, so that's good enough. We'll do what we need to do game to game. Let's not be dissatisfied with a 21-point win, because we had the maze out, and everybody was rocking, and we had the D going, and they weren't going to threaten us, so just pound it down their throats. The other half saying, we need a passing game. We're not going to beat Ohio State. We got Wisconsin in a couple of weeks. We need to throw the ball. We got to work on the passing game. So I'll let you guys take it from there.
I'll pass it to my partner, Dre. You can kick us off.
Yeah. Well, for one, I thought, you really have to look at this 2 ways. It depends what kind of, fan you really are and where you think, Michigan program should be. For me, I don't really care about the 2-4 season last year. I don't use that as some kind of mulligan or excuse. And now Harbaugh's made these off-season changes that I kind of wiped the slate clean for him. No, this is year 7. So by it being year 7, I have the expectation. And the goal for this program is to win the Big Ten and beat Ohio State. We haven't done it. So when I look at them at a game-by-game basis, on one part, I do enjoy the game as we're winning it, and I can get caught up in it. But also, I am paying attention to, okay, what boxes are we checking or not checking to make sure that we're able to beat the teams we need to beat, as in Penn State, Wisconsin, Ohio State, to win the Big Ten, right? And so when you look at the past 2 weeks, yes, Michigan has dominated on the run, and that's very, very important. Controlling the time of possession, asserting your dominance in terms of the physicality of the game. That's all very, very important. I'm not taking anything away from Michigan. They're doing a fantastic job there. But at some point in these bigger games, either at Penn State, which always turns out to be a whiteout game, a very tough environment. Ohio State has struggled in those games in the past, right? At Wisconsin, we struggled there against Ohio State. At some point, Cade McNamara, or whoever's playing quarterback for Michigan at the time, J.J. McCarthy, whoever's going to be, will need to be able to make throws because we're not going to run it for 300 plus yards. That's just unheard of against those type of teams. You don't do that. What are the chances that year 7 on the Harbaugh, all of a sudden we just can run for 300 yards against everybody? It's not going to happen. So when we're talking about dissatisfaction in the passing game, it's not a slight against the team's overall performance. It's saying, okay, in terms of our trajectory to get to the goal of winning the Big Ten, we still need to see this aspect of the game explored and proven that it can be successful and not something that, oh, well, we'll just worry about that when we get to it. I'm sorry. I don't think that's a recipe for success.
Yeah. And it my take on it is pretty similar, right? Michigan, I want to be very clear. They did a good thing by beating Washington. That was an impressive win. The defense is rolling. I saw a quote from Mike McDonald today that said, it's pretty easy to play defense when you're not out there a lot, and I agree. That's true. But, similar to what Dre said, that, there's going to come a point in time where you're going to have to lean on that pass game. The better, programs, the better defensive coordinators in the country, and especially in the Big Ten in general, are going to take away what you do well, right? So they obviously most defenses can't stop everything, but those high level defensive coordinators are going to take away your calling card. So if that's running the football, then they're going to stack that box. They're going to play man coverage. They're going to have one high safety, and they're going to dare you to beat them throwing the ball. And if you can do it, that's great. But if you can't, that's where you start to get into trouble. And I, felt like my personal opinion was, to me, in Western Michigan game, that was a game that you can go into that game, make some mistakes, kind of, I don't want to use the term play around, but kind of, yeah, you could kind of play around offensively, experiment that if, Cade does throw it 25 to 30 times, throws an interception or two, you're still going to win that game. So that is my, premise on it. I like I said, being 2-0, that's a great spot. Everything that you want is in play and in front of you. It's just, I would rather have my quarterback, throwing the ball in a no stress environment before I have to put him in that stressful environment and him have to throw the football. So that's kind of my take on it. But I think, like I said, the defense was incredible. They're running the ball really well. They've got a great combo with Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins. So they got things going well. It's just, me personally, maybe I'm being selfish. I would just like to see them throw the ball a little bit more before you actually have to.
I guess I'm somewhere in the middle in that I don't think there's an issue with having an identity. And with as much as we've seen 5 wide spread formations, throwing the ball all over the place, and even programs like LSU and Alabama adjusting over the last 5 years, even Wisconsin, when you watch Wisconsin play, it's still a slugfest, but it's not like they're not out of the spread formation 70% of the time themselves. So pretty much everybody across the country has adapted to some type of spread formation, RPO type offense, and throwing the football most of the time. So I think that looking at what I was doing right now, looking at what Wisconsin typically does in contending for Big Ten championships, I think there's room if this is what their identity and calling card's going to be. Certainly they got a head coach who's comfortable with tight ends and fullbacks. They got a culture that's comfortable with that. We don't know about the offensive line. Everybody looks at quarterback, wide receiver, running backs in terms of, okay, which way is this offense directed and where should the strengths be? But offensive linemen typically like to run block, but more so than pass block. Mm-hmm. And I think you can have an identity with the run game. Can you throw for 45 yards a game and win a Big Ten championship? No, you can't. Can they maybe implement more of a Wisconsin model run pass ratio, throw it more like 18 or 20 times a game instead of 40 like most teams do, and win a Big Ten title? Yeah, if the defense is good enough and if they're going to run it down people's throats, I think they probably can. What was a little disappointing and discouraging, Desmond, basically to your point, is I can understand that even though they were controlling most of the game, that they didn't have that kind of lead on the scoreboard most of the game. It just felt like they were under control. They're not giving up anything to Washington, but it was like 10-0 forever. And I can understand on the scoreboard, it's still a game. So all it's going to take is a turnover or a big play, and boom, we're in a dogfight, even though we've controlled this game. But once it's stretched out, I don't know why you wouldn't work on the passing game. Why you wouldn't work on, we got a good defense in front of us. For as disappointing as Washington is, they still got athletes and they still bring a pretty good defense. Why not work on it? Just like you said, Desmond, instead of waiting till there's 3 minutes on the clock and we got to drive at 85 yards down Wisconsin's throat and we don't have time to run. Let's see if Cade McNamara can pull through against like a top 5 to 10 defense in the country under that scenario. Let's work on the passing game. It's always different in front of a crowd and a real defense that wants to hit you. For as good as your defense is in practice, to practice against, it's still something different about the crowd and game situation and guys that want to knock your head off to get that quarterback some real reps.
And I also think, at least for me, a lot of this comes from the historical context of Harbaugh's tenure in Michigan. So now, yes, they are running the football at a clip that is more impressive than any other year under Harbaugh, but it's not necessarily the first time we have seen even the better teams Harbaugh's had at Michigan in 2016, 2018. They had teams able to run the ball effectively. But here's what happens. It's almost like Groundhog Day. Michigan starts off their season in September. More times than not, they have their first 3 or 4 games at home. More times than not, those opponents are lesser opponents, some a little bit better than others. You have your Air Force, you have your Army, you have your Northern Illinois, Western a couple times, right? And Michigan will dominate those games. That's happened plenty of times in the past, no matter who the quarterback was, no matter if it was Wilton Spate, if it was Brandon Peter, if it was John O'Corn, if it was Shea Patterson, Dylan McCaffrey, Joe Milton, you name it, right? Michigan will start the season off very well, and they'll run the football, and they'll be physical because they have really good defense, like the 2016 defense, right? But then when they'll get into games in which they need quarterback play, like at Wisconsin or against Penn State, then they're not able to run the ball as effectively, and their quarterback has to make plays. But here's the problem. Similar to what we've seen these past 2 games, the quarterback, no matter who it is, necessarily didn't have the reps, or even with those reps, proven that they can consistently make big-time throws they need to make. And then now they're in those big games, and now they're trying to rely or have to rely on a aspect of their offense that they have not ironed out, right? And so then they lose, and they end up, 3rd place in the Big Ten. Think about this. Even the best years under Harbaugh at Michigan, the best they've ever finished was 3rd place in the Big Ten East. So I'm sorry. I get that fear, especially when I haven't seen the quarterback played. I think it's necessary to win a Big Ten this year. That, I know we're running football effectively, but in the grand scheme of things, how is this really different? You can be happy about the 2 games, but how is this really different in terms of things we have not seen? I know we all want a Big Ten title for Michigan because we never had it. So what have we seen these first 2 games that show a change in another guard, right? Something different under Harbaugh. If anything, it's kind of more of the same, even for his better teams.
Yeah, and it's one of those things because I have expectations and thoughts that Michigan could potentially win the Big Ten this year. Like if, especially the way the defense has looked in the first 2 weeks, is a real and feasible thing this year. It's not a, pipe dream, hoping for the best. I truly feel that they could contend for the Big Ten title. You see Ohio State is not, the invincible machine that, that previously they have been. They had a loss to Oregon this past weekend, and it's there. You know what I mean? It's there. And Dre and I, when we had the season preview, I talked about it. I'm like, with a brand new starting quarterback at Ohio State, because that's typically been the king of the Big Ten and, until they're not, they're starting a new quarterback whose name is not Justin Fields, right? We knew when Justin Fields was coming to Columbus, that guy is really good, and we know for a fact he can play football. So with bringing in a new starter, like I think if there was going to be a year in the last 4 to 5 years for Ohio State to be, knocked off the hill, I felt like this was the year. So that's the reason why, I want them to at least explore it, is because you're just not going to cross that threshold, like you said, Mark, with throwing for 50 yards in a football game. And my thought is, let's practice it in a live game before we need it. And because there's no way your quarterback gets better than to have live game reps of someone, like you said, trying to knock your head off versus a Tuesday practice where nobody's going to hit you. You got the red jersey on. Life is good, and the coach is going to yell at anybody who even touches you. Like there's a vast difference with that, and we talked about it as well after the Western game, I want to say. But once that game was over, my thought process was Cade McNamara didn't get any better today. And that to me, I feel like he needs to take gradual steps before you get to the Wisconsin and Penn State and Ohio State games. Because I think he has the ability to do it, but having those game reps is definitely that remains to be seen.
I see our guy Paul Van Wagner's in the chat here. Paul's a Virginia Tech guy. He works for ESPN Blacksburg, and we've got a tremendous Virginia Tech pregame and postgame show. Those are going to be over on the main channel. So everybody, too many shows to talk about, too many to run down. You're never going to be able to take them all in. So we'll just let you know these two are here, Desmond and Dre, after every Michigan game right here on the Michigan channel. Let you know about Ohio State after the Buckeyes game. You can catch Ori over on the Buckeyes channel after the Ohio State game. We got Penn State post-game coverage. They got a big one against Auburn non-conference. And again, I see Paul's a native of Michigander, and he's in the chat probably checking in on the Maize and Blue, but he checks in, and they got a great Virginia Tech pregame and postgame. So,
yeah, I bet after week 1 they was having a great postgame after beating North Carolina, huh? See, those are the type of games that I would love post games to do for Michigan. Having a ranked opponent, your team's an underdog, and you find a way to get it done. See, that's what I want. And so when me and Desmond, that's what we both want. So when we talk about how Michigan's progressing, is that goal in mind, right? How are you going to be prepared to? You need to have multiple ways to win a game. It's very tough to be a really good team and through the course of the season and be one-dimensional. It's just very, very, very tough. And that's just a concern. It's not a weakness right now. We don't know that yet. It's a question mark, right? It's a question mark. I've seen in the past in our comments, people will say stuff like, well, I'm sure this coaching staff knows, K can throw the ball. He broke passing records at Nevada high school Nevada passing records, or, he wouldn't be starting. They know what he can do in practice. That doesn't always translate in the game. And that's something that us Michigan fans know very well with all these quarterbacks that we've had over the last few years. You have to prove it on the field. And you should not sell yourself short by just hoping and trusting in the coaching staff. Let your eyes, let the eye test, convince you. And right now, I don't see how you can say there has been some kind of test on the passing game. So, that's our type of things to keep in mind.
Dre, are you a Harbaugh guy?
I'm a Michigan guy. I was never against Harbaugh. Of course, like every other Michigan fan, I was ecstatic when he came here. Now, I give you what you give me. Harbaugh hasn't given anything to the University of Michigan in terms of things of merit. So here's where I think I separate with some fans than others. Some fans will say, well, what are you talking about? We've had his winning percentage is really good. And, he's had multiple 9-10 win seasons. That is all true, and by all means, that's better than the previous coaching staffs. I understand that. But what things of merit has he brought here? Things of merit. When you look in the trophy case, what do you see? Dust. Okay, that's just the honest truth. Like no Big Ten. Michigan football players have the only time they touch the turf in Indy is when they go do the NFL draft combine. That's it. They're not touching that, during their time at Michigan. That's a problem. So because Harbaugh has not delivered the goods there, yeah, I have soured on him. It's not personal. It's all about the results. So to answer your question, Mark, I don't have anything against Harbaugh. I'm not exactly happy what he's done here, but because I put the University of Michigan program first. There's no person, no matter how much significance they've had to the program as a player and coach and who they're connected to in the university, that's bigger than the overall program. The University of Michigan football program is bigger than Jim Harbaugh. He does not the end all be all. We thought he was, but we see that's not the case. And so you should be okay with making comments and visualizing the future if it's necessary, with Jim Harbaugh not being in the picture.
Yeah, you got to wonder what's said between those players when they go to the NFL Combine. Like, this is what this place looks like, huh?
Yeah, yeah. It's much bigger than it looks on TV.
So, Dre, let me throw this one out. What do you think it's going to take for Harbaugh to keep his job? And what would it take for him to keep his job if you were in charge?
Ooh.
Oh, I like that question. So there will be a difference in my answer because I believe the expectations are different. I think given like I said, the significance that Harbaugh has and ties that Harbaugh has in that program, I think if he can find some way to get to 8-4 this season, maybe even 7-5, but I hope at least the 8-4 this season. I think he saves his job. In my world, I don't really care about the win number. I care more or less about, I'll say, beating Ohio State and getting to the Big Ten title. If it takes 10 wins to do it, great. If it takes 11 to do it, great. That may not be fair. I understand that given the how bad last season is. I understand that, when the roster turnover and coaching staff turnover, I understand all those things. But I'm sorry, guys. This is year 7. This is year 7. What you're asking me to do is to give this guy grace. I'm okay with doing that. I'm a fair person, a fair fan. But you have to prove to me that you deserve that grace because you have proven that you can deliver the goods. Right? I'll give you an example. Brian Kelly. People talk about Harbaugh shaking up the coaching staff this past offseason. They use what Brian Kelly did at Notre Dame as an example of how well it can turn out. Well, don't forget, Brian Kelly in 2013 got Notre Dame to a national title game. Now, Alabama blew their doors off, okay, but they got there, right? He delivered the goods. He took that program to different heights. Yeah, and things turned, soured, and then he had to, reshuffle things up. But he had proven that he can do it. Harbaugh has not proven he can do it. So I'm not going to give him the grace and the trust. He has to, that's where I'm at. And that's why I'll need to see something dramatically different. If Michigan goes out and wins 9 games, would that be better than expectations that many people have for him in the season? Of course. But in the grand scheme of things, it's no different than Harbaugh's best seasons here. So why should I think he can do more, right? What are we really trending towards besides, this is what Harbaugh normally does here. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of the way I look at it.
Desmond, obviously you can jump in on those as well if you've got any take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm as far as what it will take for him to keep his job, I agree. I think 8 wins will be enough because I just feel like it's not a failure or embarrassment to Michigan overall, right? There's fans that do have the expectation of we should beat Ohio State. We should go to the Big Ten championship and we should compete for a college football playoff spot. But, it'd be vastly different than like, 4-8 type of season, which, you kind of extrapolate out last year, which essentially would have been that. For me, what I'll say is I like the trend that I'm seeing so far is, Big Ten Media Day, you had guys talking about culture, they talked about just putting the work in, stacking the days, like things that lead to winning. Because, so often as fans and outsiders, we look at the end result of, well, did you win or lose on Saturday? Because that's all that really matters, which is very true. But the way you get there is by putting in the work on, Monday through Friday. So as long as those guys are doing those things and saying the right things, because, they had Big Ten Media Day where they said the right things, and especially defensively, they've come out and done the right things. They've played fast. The team has stuck together. They've played well, and they have two wins. And to have a 0 in the loss column is big. At this point of the year, there's a lot of teams that have a 1 or a 2. So they're definitely trending in the right direction. I'd probably need to see 10 wins because I think Michigan's ceiling is beating Ohio State, representing the Big Ten, being the Big Ten champion and competing for college football playoff positions, because you look at the administration and the athletic department, they don't spare an expense. They are legitimately giving Jim Harbaugh everything that he asked for when it comes to, recruiting, facilities. You've got a fan base that literally you have 100,000 people in that stadium every single week. You look at the Maze Out last week, that the atmosphere there was just unreal. And to me, that shows the dedication of a fan base that you have. And that's part of what is needed as well to really compete and be to be in that national championship conversation. So I just look at it and there are no internal hurdles that Harbaugh has to jump. He's got an administration that is about winning. They may not be, is dialed in as far as, what all is going on in college football. But as far as giving him the tools that he needs, giving him the facilities that he needs, like I said, with recruiting budgets, things like that, like there's no reason that you're not there outside of, your coaching and philosophy and the preparation and development of the players that you get on campus. I've said it as well that, Michigan, they're programming the eyes of recruits is still elite, because you look at 5-star guys that want to come here. You look at 4-star guys that want to come here and that are, coming on visits and things like that. Like they still have the right perception. So literally everything is there. And, for me, that's just the expectation. I do expect them to essentially be what Ohio State is. And, this year aside of winning the Big Ten and we have a shot to get in the playoff every year, I don't see anything in the way of Michigan outside of, themselves and the head coach.
Taking our first shot at Michigan live stream here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate everybody being here with about 50 on the line here at the Voice of College Football. So this is our Michigan channel. So lock it in. Please like the video, share these videos out on social media. Check out what we've got available here. You'll see some content from myself. Got a number of Michigan writers that we bring on here from Rivals and other places. Steve Day's Michigan podcast. And these two right here, we got Desmond and Dre. Join them for post-game after the game. Desmond also posting some other content, so lock it in there. So let's see. What next on Michigan? Give us a dose. So this is a little team here. I've checked these two out, and they tear into it. So you got a segment going. What's that thing called? Like something Challenge Dre, or what do you call that thing?
Oh,
that is the Let's Attack Dre segment.
There it is.
It's funny.
So Dre, do you want to kick it off?
You're better at setting the table. Go ahead and set the table for us.
So basically what it came down to is we actually had our first live stream, and Dre is one who is such a passionate Michigan fan that he has high expectations for the program. So he makes comments and has takes that say just that, and that's okay. But we had a couple people in the chat that were that were a little, just wanted to challenge his thought process and point of view on things. But I would say overall we're pretty in lockstep as far as, I believe that was mainly after the Western game, but
No, it was Mike Hart. And what happened was, in particular, so we were talking about after the Washington game, and of course, Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins go off and rush for 300 plus yards, and the question was, how much credit do you give Mike Hart? And how much percentage? And I didn't, I'm like, it's been 2 games, I don't know, 25%, and people lost their minds. They're like, they basically acted like I said that Mike Hart who, like, I'm like, hold on a second, look, a position coach is very important, but, and Mike Hart was one of my favorite players at the University of Michigan. I love number 20, but, he's no longer toting the rock on that in the backfield, okay? So I'm not going to give him like a huge amount of credit, and people are like, oh, you're out your mind, well, have you seen the results on the field? It's like, and, these comments are just rolling, and Desmond, being the ultimate troll he is, just just turned this into a segment, and it's all in good fun. It's all in good fun. And I think people need to understand my passion. And I always find it funny, Mark, that Michigan football fans, we're always got this perception that we're so proud, right? We're so proud of our university and our ethics and morals and our history of the game, right?
Yep.
Team 135, like that. That's what we're all about in University of Michigan. But yet I don't think fans don't apply that same pride to the expectations on the field. We're not, and this is no slight against these programs about to mention, but we're not a Purdue. We're not a University of Kentucky in terms of football, right? We have some of the biggest boosters and richest alumni in the world. We have one of the biggest football stadiums in the world, right? We have a passionate fan base. We pack out our stadium. Our administration spares no expense when it comes to investing in our athletics for the most part. There's no reason to be afraid or to be content with certain results when there is more to be aspired to. And I hear it, for example, all the time, national, analysts would say stuff like, Michigan fans, they think they're at Ohio State's level. No, it's not about thinking that we're at Ohio State's level. They have been better than us, and they've won a lot more than we have lately. But there's no reason, in terms of setup, that Michigan should not be at Ohio State's level. So what? We haven't been there before. That doesn't mean that we can't get there. There's nothing blocking us from getting there for the most part. So yeah, I'm going to continue to push and push and push the envelope until I believe that we're at that level, because it's possible. If it was impossible, then we can adjust our expectations and move goalposts and stuff like that. But we don't have to do that. We don't have to settle. And that's the interesting game that I play with other fans is, well, why are you settling? You don't have to do that. There's a balance between having expectations and also just settling because you're afraid of having a bad next hire or something like that.
So, Dre, how did you become a Michigan fan?
It started when I was 3 years old. My grandfather, and I don't know, Desmond, if we shared this on our Dre and Des podcast Instagram, but my grandfather, when I was 3 years old, got me, I think it was 1997. It was the national championship year. He got me a replica Michigan football uniform. I had the helmet, I had the jersey, I had the pants, even with the shoulder pads and knee pads and thigh pads. And I got it for Christmas, and I've been hooked ever since. I would go play Pop Warner football like a lot of kids on Saturdays. And when I'll come back, typically Michigan plays at 12, and I'll get back and I'm watching the game, and I've been in love ever since, watching, my favorite players in Michigan football history, Braylon Edwards, Mike Hart, Chad Henne, etc. So, I just been in love ever since I put on the uniform. I never got the chance to actually play for them, but as a kid, I had the dream, and I had on the uniform, and the love started there.
Nice. Very good. It's always interesting. I always like to get people's stories on how they became football fans, sports fans. For you, Desmond, how'd you get into sports?
Mine was just, so number one, kind of just, backyard basketball, just playing pickup a lot. And one day I was 12 years old, and my dad came home and told me and my brother, like, hey, I signed you guys up for football. So you guys are going to play football. I'm like, what? Like, okay. We used to play, kind of backyard ball and stuff like that, but never anything that was organized. And man, that first couple weeks was brutal. At this time, I lived in Alabama, and it was hot. And I'm a relatively small guy, and was also a relatively small kid. So a lot of kids were bigger than me, and getting tackled and hit. First time with a helmet on was like, man, it was interesting. It's a wonder I kept playing after that, because the first couple of weeks was just rough, but it got better, and got more fun, and you start to practice and get a little better and all that good stuff. So it's it just started by just really my dad just kind of force signing me up when I was 11, 12 years old, and it's off and running from there. So
nice. I don't know if we've got any comments or questions in the chat that are intended for us.
Let's go with this one with Rod Anderson 34. We'll have Mark kick this one off. How many pass attempts should Cade have in the next 2 games?
Well, if everything goes as scripted, and I know that they've got Northern Illinois this week. Is it Wisconsin the next week after that?
No, it's Rutgers. Yeah. Wisconsin's
that's
okay,
right.
Then it's Rutgers. Okay, next 2 weeks. Okay, makes sense. So if they can win those games comfortably, if the Northern Illinois game is, I don't know, 45-14, and the Rutgers game might be a little bit more competitive in the 37-21 range, something like that, I would hope that Cade McNamara is going to throw 18 to 22 passes in those games. That's they've easily established what they want to do. I don't think they're going to go the Bill Belichick route where they get a different team every week showing up with a different offense. So I'm good with the identity. It's just, let's see a passing offense. Let's see them work on it. And so I'm going to go 18 to 22 passes. Feels comfortable for me.
Okay. Dre, what about you?
Sure. I would go 20 to 25. I just think that, I guess, especially an opponent like Northern Illinois, if you break it down in terms of 4 quarters, if you throw, 5 passes a quarter, that gets you 20 attempts. That's not asking for a lot. That you can mix that in with a couple of bubble screens. I know they tried, and it's failed. For some reason, the outside receivers aren't picking up those blocks. That's not a good attempt. It's an attempt in terms of number, but you want a successful play because it's going to be needed, right? So that can come in form of bubble screens, maybe a couple curl routes, some quick RPOs that Cade makes a quick decision and gets the ball out quickly. Just 5 attempts a quarter, or maybe get to 7 or 8, and then you get to 25, right? So I think 20 to 25 is a good expectation, and I think that a right number, because you can possibly have different scenarios and play with different scenarios. Maybe some short passing distance plays, 3rd and 3, or maybe you have a couple 3rd and longs or 2nd and longs. Maybe you want to do a play action on 1st and 10. Take a shot, especially since you run the football so effectively. The defense is definitely not going to expect that, right? So I think 20 and 25 is a good number, and it gives you the chance to try different scenarios out.
Yeah, I'm a little more greedy, but I think
I know you are.
We can all agree that. Well, I think we can agree they're not going to air it out and throw it,
right.
30 times a game.
Got to adjust the expectation.
Yeah. And that's it. I mean, we have to live with it, right? I don't call plays, so
Right.
it just kind of is what it is. So, yeah, I would say in that 20 to 25 range would be good. I just, like I said, I'm beating a dead horse because I say the same thing, but I just felt like these first 4 games, and maybe taking Washington out of it was just a really good opportunity to throw the ball around a lot. So. The tough thing is the Big Ten's getting better. Like it's not getting worse. Like Rutgers, 2-3 years ago was a game that you just roll out of bed and Michigan's gonna throttle them. That's not the case anymore. So these teams are getting better, right? Teams are improving, so it's gonna make your road to Indianapolis a lot tougher. And that's my thought on it. But yeah, I'd say 20 to 25 passes. I would be. I'll probably shut up and stop. Beating that dead horse. So.
Tron 7000, appreciate the comment there. Great channel. You guys are the authority on Michigan football. So these two join everybody every Saturday after the ball game. So even though it's Northern Illinois, hey, they're going to chop it up and have a good time. So join them. They're obviously going to talk whatever happens in the game, which I know Dre hopes that it's not a little closer than it's supposed to be. But that might make for an interesting conversation. But they'll obviously look ahead to what Michigan did well, what they didn't do well, and how that projects to the Big Ten season as they knock out their third non-conference game. And so join them on their post-game show. And just know that we've got post-game shows all over the place. So, again, I'm not going to run them down. But most of the major teams in the Power 5, we got post-game shows for at the Voice of College Football. So we got a main channel, if you're not aware of that, where I do most of my work. And then we've got all sorts of good things going on at these team channels. And Desmond and Dre are tearing it up. So a lot of good content that they've been posting here in this early 2021 football season.
Yep. So we've got another question from Malachi. It says, can Ohio State stop Michigan's run game? This is coming from an Ohio State fan. I want to know what you think. So he posed this one to you, Mark. So I'll let you kick it off.
Well, I guess for Michigan fans, it's too bad they didn't play last Saturday, because if that Ohio State rush defense would have showed up in Michigan's run game, you got to think, and it just wasn't flat out. It was a little bit of both. It wasn't just flat out Ohio State's not physical enough to stop this run. That was part of it. They were getting beat at the point of attack, but also there are just some head scratchers when it comes to defensive scheme and being able to adjust. Oregon ran one play where it just busted wide open 3, if not 4 times, where they basically brought the tight end in motion from left to right to bring an Ohio State defender to that side. And then they had the wide receiver just crash down and seal off the left side, and
off and
there
running.
was like nobody in the screen, and they kept doing that, and Ohio State never adjusted to it. So I don't know. It looks like this early season looks like 2018, and somebody in the chat actually brought that up.
Oh, God.
So Dre knows very well in 2018, Michigan, and I stated it the week of the Ohio State Michigan game that Michigan should win this game. And I lined up everybody that they both played, and there was no comparison between the two teams. Ohio State still had a super talented team, but they just hadn't put it together. Their defense was atrocious that year. They gave up 51 the week before to Maryland. And if Maryland doesn't, if they don't blow a pass in the end zone for a 2-point conversion in overtime, that they were going for the win, they beat Ohio State. And Maryland was not good, and they rushed for over 300 yards on Ohio State. So I went game by game, like they both played Maryland, they both played Nebraska, Indiana, on down the line, and said every game Michigan's outplaying Ohio State. Every game, same common opponent. And at that point, I'm kind of a metrics guy, like line it up, and I'm not going to blow one game out of proportion. But when there's 5 like opponents, and Michigan dominated all of them, and Ohio State scraped by all 5 of them, then I'm going into that game saying they play very like schedules, and Michigan's just a better football team. That said, I wasn't surprised when Urban Meyer and the boys put together a game plan and took Michigan to the woodshed when it was game time. So I'll never discount Ohio State once they get to that game, but they're playing defense right now. And it's just not this one game. It goes back to last season and the Minnesota game this year. They're playing defense like they did that season. Now they still went 13-1 and won the Rose Bowl and finished number 3 in the country, but they needed Dwayne Haskins to throw 50 touchdown passes.
And Michigan helped a lot with that. We contributed to a lot of that number that day.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, you hit a soft spot with 2018, and so Desmond can really talk about this. There's a funny backstory to that game. So, Michigan starts off that season losing to Notre Dame at Notre Dame, and they go on their revenge tour. They win 10 in a row, and they're dominating everyone. Mind you, once again, Desmond is an Alabama fan. I call him at the work, as we normally do. We talk about football, college football in particular. And Desmond, what did I do?
Oh, you, man, you called me. And so usually, it's like, hey, what's up, man? What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. So it's usually in the car. So it's like, Bluetooth. When I see, he didn't call me, I answer the phone. And the first thing I hear is, we want all the smoke. Michigan, we want Bama. We want them. No, this is the year. We want them. We're gonna beat them. I'm ready. We're gonna play Ohio State this week. We're gonna beat them. Everything's lining up, and it was just the funniest thing ever. And actually, I told him, I'm like, listen, man, the way that you guys are playing right now, and we talked about it, I'm like, Ohio State should have lost that game to Maryland. I mean, if the quarterback doesn't one hop the wide open throw in the flats, Ohio State loses that game as I think they should have. So I'm just like, Michigan is just trending up 10 in a row. Ohio State is just, based on that game, you're just like,
surviving.
They're struggling, man. I'm like, you guys are in good shape, man. You guys are in good shape. And then the wheels absolutely fell off.
and I learned my lessons then, Mark. I never discount or Ohio State, because I tell you one thing, you guys just right now you have our number, and another benefit, and I think this has benefited you guys a lot, even when you come into a season like this year with a new quarterback and question marks on defense. By the time we get to the game, consider the fact you guys have won 14 out of the last 15. When we get to the game, by then you typically have smoothed it out, or answered a lot of those question marks throughout the season. Typically you do. You're not saying you're perfect on to that game, but you tend to find out what you have or don't have and make an adjustment. So even if now it looks like, if Michigan played today with Ohio State, they have a pretty good shot of winning. By the time we get to that Saturday in November, that last Saturday in November, that may not be the same Ohio State team. And so I learned my lesson. I will caution Michigan fans to think about that. It's okay to feel pretty good about it, but be careful what you ask for, because by the time we get there in November, they may not be the same team. Nope,
that is very
never
true.
do it again.
Yeah, it's you got to take it one game at a time. That's a great story. So, Dre, do you think so? Rod Anderson got another question. Should Michigan hire a passing game coordinator? Says Gaddis seems like a run game coordinator. What are your thoughts on that?
My problem with that, you guys remember a few years ago, I think it was 2017, when we had Pep Hamilton, and I'm trying to think who were the other officers. It was like co-offensive coordinators that we had. I can't think of the other one. How is it? Was it Drevno? Was it Cole?
Tim Drevno was around at one point. Yeah.
I think it might have been.
We had co-offensive coordinators, and I remember an issue at that time that a lot of Michigan fans were talking about was maybe too many cooks in the kitchen. Kitchen. Too many cooks. That could be a problem too. You don't want, I know that's designated sides of offense, passing and also running, but who's making that final call? On that particular down. I think it's a decent idea to explore. But it can also cause other issues, such as, even more contemplation or what type of play that you run. If anything, to be quite honest with you, was it Rod
Yep.
Anderson? To be quite honest with you, if you need to think about getting a passing game coordinator and you already have a good running game, maybe you need to find a coordinator who can do both. I much rather consider that route than trying to have another person in there, and that complicates things a little bit. That's just me.
Yeah. Mark, what about you? What do you think? Should Michigan hire a passing game coordinator?
It's funny because everything Dre was talking about, what it reminded me of, especially since the conversation we just had about 2018, reminds me of Ohio State in 2018, because they had two excellent defensive coordinators, Greg Schiano, Rutgers head coach, Tampa Bay head coach. They've got an NFL head coach coaching the defense. Plus they had Alex Grinch, who's now at Oklahoma, who tore it up at Washington State after he left Ohio State, took like a 120 defense in the country and made him a top 30 defense. So you would think, oh, we got all these 4 and 5 stars, got these two defensive coordinators who obviously know what they're doing. It should all work. But the problem was, that we had two defensive coordinators and nobody was the guy calling the shots. So they probably had their differences. And there was also talk that Schiano made it way too complicated coming from the NFL and didn't let him just play, and too complicated of a formula. So I think that always depends on the situation. That was a bad situation. You could certainly hire a passing coordinator and it could work. You would just have to make sure everybody knows their roles and everybody knows what the deal is.
Yeah, I look at, obviously the ideal situation is LSU of 2019 with Joe Brady. But I'm a believer that coaches have egos and pretty big ones. And if a coach feels like he is qualified enough to be a passing game coordinator, he probably feels like he's qualified enough to be the offensive coordinator. So, and not that, he would do anything to sabotage, any program or anybody, but I just think I think it works easier when you have one guy who's calling the plays, because you just get a flow of things. So where, a flow of the game, and you kind of see, we may run the ball to set up, this play action pass, different things like that, or this formation, gives us a better look for the run game, to where if you're, if the head coach is just saying, run and pass, you're just kind of, I'm curious on how that flow happens and goes, but I'm a big believer, just give it to one guy. We even look at Gaddis, and when he was at Alabama, him and Loxley, they had a weird press conference thing where they, Loxley said Gaddis didn't call plays. Gaddis said he did. Loxley said he didn't, and it just kind of it adds complexity that I just don't think is necessary. Like you said, Dre, if the thought is we have an OC and we maybe need a pass game coordinator, the thought probably should be we need a new offensive coordinator.
Hey guys, I'm going to take off right now. One more time, everybody. I'm at the Voice of College Football. We got a main channel. We got team channels. Desmond and Dre are tearing it up with Michigan post game. When they wrap it up at whatever point that is, you can head on over to our Florida State channel. I'm going to be talking Florida State Seminoles, and that's not going to be pretty after losing to Jacksonville State on a Hail Mary. That was ridiculous. So we're going to talk Florida State football. So when Desmond and Dre get wrapped up, if you want to talk some more college football, Florida State channel will be over there. And Desmond, if you would just post the super chat that came in and just acknowledge that, would be awesome.
For sure. Let's Toast Media always is on our post game, so definitely appreciate the super chat.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you, Dre. Good to see you, Desmond. Have a good one.
See you, Mark. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. See you. So we had one more I wanted to get to. This one here. Thanks again to Let's Toast Media. Always shows love to the channel, is always on our live chats. So definitely appreciate that. But Dre, Joseph says the new defense actually gives Michigan a puncher's chance. What are your thoughts on that?
Ohio State's. Michigan's new defense.
Correct. Yep.
Yes, I would agree with that, especially if Aiden Hutchinson and Mike Morris, Gene Upshaw, those guys can generate the type of pressure that they have these past 2 weeks against CJ for Ohio State. I think it's definitely possible. I think the one thing that I've noticed from Ohio State and CJ is that he does not seem to have. He had a really good games statistically for them. When the pressure's kind of high, he doesn't seem to have the composure that previous quarterbacks have had at Ohio State. Guys like J.T. Barrett, Justin Fields, Braxton Miller, etc. Not saying he's not really good. I think he is good, and he will continue to get better because he's young. But thus far, if you can pressure that kid, he can make some mistakes. So, yeah, you take what Michigan has done well in terms of getting pressure. Well, Ohio State has struggled. Well, if you think about that last drive Ohio State had, and Oregon stopped them from scoring to tie the game up. I mean, I think they sacked CJ twice, or they sacked him definitely once, and they almost got him a second time. So you definitely can generate pressure if you're talented enough, and you give yourself a chance, because now offensively you realize that Ohio State has problems right now in terms of their run defense, even their passing defense right now. So, yeah, I agree with that. They have a puncher's chance. But the problem, once again, goes to that these are issues that are currently going on right now for Ohio State. And they have so much time, and we do as well, to get better, but to iron out those issues by the time we get to November, where we may not be able to take advantage of the things that we see that are chinks in the armor as of now. Yeah, and I think, to me, the thing that's not going to change is Aiden Hutchinson's production. Like, I don't think I think he is going to be a force the entire year. Mm-hmm. And when you look at a team like Ohio State, who at least in the Michigan game, likes to throw the football, that's, pressure on a quarterback, it doesn't matter how good he is. I mean, you look at Tom Brady, when he's pressured, he's not as good. Mm-hmm. So, that is the great equalizer. When you look at even the NFL, the premium positions are, defensive end, left tackle, and quarterback. Those are the guys that get paid the most. The Super Bowl. Right. Exactly. Yes. I think that I think Michigan's defense does give them a shot against OSU. And I mean, if the game were played, this week, I think it would be very different versus, in November. And like you said, that's the tough part, is because CJ Stroud is going to get, 9 more games, before he has to line up against Michigan. But if you can get pressure, man, it's a game changer, because you think about strip sacks and things like that. That is a monster swing of just momentum and just the, football games in general, to be able to get, to do that. The last thing, the kind of next thing I wanted to talk about was, do you think Michigan not taking the football away on defense, do you think that could be something to potentially bite them down the road? Not forcing turnovers is what you mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's turnovers are huge. Not only do they give your offense a chance to score, they're demoralizing to the other team's offense, right? It completely flips the game over. Whether it's an interception here, a strip sack, it's a forcing a ball carrier to fumble, right? It totally changes the game. So no, you need to find a way to force some turnovers. If not, you're putting all the pressure on your defense to be perfect in terms of tackling, to be perfect in terms of assignments, right? And we all know in today's college football, it's hard to stop teams. It's hard to keep teams under 30. So it's not like the NFL where you can sometimes get away with playing the bend but don't break defense. It's tough to do that in college, right? So no, I think that can bite them if they don't find a way to force more turnovers. Yeah, I would say that's probably the one area that that Michigan can improve on defensively. I think the defense has been virtually flawless. They have played really well. Mm-hmm. On the back end, they've played well, and I think part of the DBs playing well is
your front four getting so much pressure, because those things kind of coincide where I don't have to cover as long if Hutchinson's getting home, and you know what I mean, and vice versa. If I'm a really good defensive backfield where I can cover guys for 4 or 5 seconds, well, I give my D-line more time to get home and sack the quarterback. So I think they've been virtually flawless. Right now, I mean, I would say that they're the best defense in the Big Ten, and if not arguably the best defense in the Big Ten. But I think some of those things are just naturally going to come. Like, I think you're naturally just, with playing defense long enough, like you're just naturally going to have some tip passes where, the ball's tipped and a guy picks it off, or kind of a guy's going to catch the ball, gets hit, ball pops up. Like, I think some of those things will just naturally happen just by virtue of playing football and just being out there. But that would probably be just the one thing, and honestly, that's probably just nitpicking. But it's definitely like I said, defense they've been lights out. Do you any concern with Rocky Lombardi coming to Ann Arbor on Saturday?
Well, the easy thing to say is, well, hey, he beat you last year, so maybe he comes to the game with a little bit more confidence. I don't think he's not going to have the dogs around him to really threaten Michigan. It's just not there. So no, I'm not too worried about Rocky Lombardi. And the thing about Michigan right now, especially when they play against, lesser talented opponents, is that they can just squeeze you to death. Like they'll man you up on the outside and they'll just overwhelm you in the line of scrimmage with their front seven. And, when you're a smaller MAC school, you don't have excellent athletes on the outside to take advantage of that. It's just like it's a terrible, terrible recipe, and it's just hard to get. Even Western, who started off their first 2 drives doing well, eventually, like, the defense just clamped down on them. And then, I really like, Ellaby, Western Michigan quarterback, he looked way different the rest of that game because he just didn't have the time. He didn't have the time because Aiden and those guys are all in his face. So, and I think Western is a much better offense than NIU. So, no, I'm not too worried about Rocky returning.
Yeah,
maybe
same
with
thing.
MSU would be, but not with NIU.
Yeah, and I think too, even with Ellerby, it's easier to make that tough throw with Hutchinson in your face in the first quarter than it is in the second and third when they've consistently been hitting you. Like, it starts to wear on you, And I think with Rocky Lombardi, like, overall, he's not very careful with the football. Like, he turns it over a bit. Like, he'll throw some picks, and just takes chances. So I think Michigan will be fine. I think, the more we talk about it, I think about it, unfortunately, it's probably going to be another extremely run heavy, 11 pass attempts game because it's because of that same factor. Like, if, you're just going to squeeze them. Like, you're just going to squeeze them to the point that, you're forcing them that they have to score again and again. And I just think it'll probably be, the Blake Corman, Hassan Haskins show, which, so far has been a pretty good movie for the first 2 shows. So it's probably going to be, more of the same this weekend. So,
yeah. And no more. Look, I'm sorry. Like, no more, weird Harbaugh, analogies, about ground and air and all that. Like, just say for once to be normal. If the running game was working, we stayed with it. Don't try to get me so General Sergeant. It's like, come on, man. Really, I know that's how the guy is, but it's just one of those Harbaugh isms that just I don't know. It just.
I mean, I get it. Like, he makes a point. Like, it just,
yes,
I don't know. It just, I get it. But to me, like, I've heard consistently that, Washington's DBs are really good. That's the strength of their team. And I'm like, well, they actually gave up 21 points to Montana as well. So I'm like, it can't be that great, but, I don't know.
I don't know where that narrative came from. I mean, like, I'm sorry. Like, Washington's corners, all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, they're like, people were talking like these are guys that could start for Bama or Clemson or something like that. Oh my gosh, like, the Washington secondary is really, 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 really good. Like, compared to what? Like, I'm sorry,
Right.
Like, is that Mickens Fitzpatrick Patrick out there? Is that gosh, terrible
Jalen Ramsey? Like, I mean, yeah.
Got Jeff Okuda out there. Like, like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm not trying to be dismissive, but it's just like that narrative that Washington has like these first round talented corners. It's like, huh? Like, where did that come from? I'm sorry. It's just.
Yeah, it's I think it'll be a Michigan win. I think it'll look a lot like the Western game. Probably a big win. But it would be 3-0 and moving on to 4-0. So we will be on right after the Michigan game wraps up. So guys, please join us. We'd love to have you guys. Love to get your comments. We'll get to as many of your questions as you can. But yeah, other than that, man, I think we might be all good.
Pleasure as always. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Talk to you Saturday.
Sounds good. See ya.